Hi, folks. I'm Bob Hales, and welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Club. Welcome to this week's show. I'm going to do something a bit different this week. This week you get to see why this show is named the Tinfoil Hat Club. I'm not going to highlight some stupid thing the government's done, although that's a really easy thing to do. I'm not going to ask you to contact the appropriate official or agency and call them on their shit so they know they're being watched. I'm not going to highlight some waste of taxpayer money. I'm not going to ask you to call your Congress critter and demand they start cutting government spending. Starting with the budgets of the agencies that I usually name, the most egregious wasters of your hard-earned tax money. I'm not going to highlight some act of government oppression or overbearing government, some act of the Transportation Security Administration or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or the IRS, or any of the other government Gestapo agencies that are slowly eroding our liberties on a daily basis. Not going to ask that you demand your Congress critter take steps in reining in an overbearing government. No, I'm not going to do like I usually do when I do this show. I started to say what I do when I do it every week, but I don't do the show every week. I'll be back at it now, I hope. But I'm not going to ask you folks to do any of that stuff I usually do. Matter of fact, I'm not going to ask you to do much of anything, except maybe think. Open your mind up to some possibilities, whether it's a Republican mind or a Democratic mind, a liberal mind or a conservative mind. Just open it up to some possibilities. I'm going to give you a few things, let roll around in there. See what you think. Think outside the box. Definitely going to be thinking outside the box. But I want you to think. And maybe do some preparing. Prepare and be ready to take action. Whatever action you think is right, if what I'm about to suggest might happen. If it does happen. So, this is the Tinfoil Hat Club, so I must be talking about a conspiracy. What kind of conspiracy am I setting you up for? Well, how about a conspiracy to well and truly end the United States as we know it? A conspiracy to end this grand experiment that began with the Declaration of Independence. A conspiracy to end this grand experiment that began with the American Revolution. A conspiracy to codify the establishment of a totalitarian government, an imperial presidency, and the loss of most, if not all, of the rights that are guaranteed us by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. How about if I'm going to propose some kind of a conspiracy like that? Now, there's something to roll around in your head and think about. Try to keep your mind open. Now, right about now, you folks got to be wondering what kind of drugs I'm on. Maybe for the folks that know me out there, you're wondering if I crawled back in that bottle I lived in for 30 years. Frankly, I can't blame you. I'm going to propose some really outside-the-box stuff. I'd be wondering the same thing if I hadn't heard it 18 months ago and have had a year and a half to watch what's been happening in the context of what I'm about to suggest to you. I'm not going to ask you to believe anything. What I am asking is that you investigate some things for yourself. I'm asking you to consider what I'm about to say in light of what has actually happened so far that you can find by your own investigation and where that might lead. All I'm asking you to do is think. Okay, that's not too much to do. How about we make a deal? You just think, all right? Now, I'm pegging what I'm about to suggest will happen to this year, to this administration, and this election. But don't think I'm saying this is all Obama's fault, because it's not. What I'm about to suggest has been coming for decades, probably since about 1920. The United States has been headed this way for years. And Obama is just the culmination of what Republicans and Democrats alike have been building toward for years. So, what I'm going to propose, what I was told 18 months ago and dismissed, what I still a year ago thought couldn't happen here, that it was only what happened in third world countries and with South American tin-horn dictators. What I seriously doubted 6 months ago, despite growing evidence. And what I now don't believe positively will happen here. But what I now believe has a better than 50-50 chance is that there will be no elections on December 6th. That they will be canceled by dictator Obama. Now the question is not can he, it is will he. And I'm over halfway to believing he will. Now how can he do that? Easy. As president, he has the power to declare a national emergency and declare martial law. And it's been done twice before in this country. President Lincoln declared martial law during the Civil War. And more recently, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that Democratic icon FDR, did it during World War II. Which is exactly how he was able to steal private property. How he was able to move an entire segment of the population, many of them citizens of the United States, into internment camps, making them leave everything they owned except what they could carry on their backs behind. If you don't think that has happened, if you don't think that can happen, has happened already right here in the United States, you just go ask anybody of Japanese descent whose family was here in the United States during World War II. And you know what? Everybody knows about the Japanese being put in internment camps. Even Japanese Americans who were U.S. citizens, everybody knows about them. Well, they were just different. You know, they looked different. Well, there's a lot of German Americans that were in this country during World War II. They were sent to concentration camps too, and yes, they were concentration camps. You can call them internment camps all you want to. They were very little difference between where we sent the Japanese and German Americans. There's very little difference between that and a Nazi concentration camp, except for we didn't happen to build gas ovens. So don't think it can't happen here. It can. The question is not, can Obama declare martial law? And if he would, what would be the excuse? The question is, will he? And what would be the outcome? Would he is a pretty easy question to answer. He has made it plain with his slash and burn campaigning, his dividing the people intentionally, his disparaging achievement, demonizing everyone who stands for a constitutional government, demonizing everything this country stands for, that he wants desperately to have a second term. But those tactics aren't working. Every time he does something, the Republican candidate picks up steam just a little bit. What are some indications that maybe he wants that kind of government? Well, here's an item. Congress refused to pass the DREAM Act. So Obama enacted it by executive order, directing that certain illegal immigrants not be deported. That is in direct violation of federal law, and there is absolutely no reading of the practice of prosecutorial discretion that gives blanket immunity to an entire class of offenders. And yes, an illegal immigrant is an offender. It is illegal to come in this country the way they do. They are breaking the law. They are offenders. And he gave blanket immunity to an entire class of criminal offenders. Here's another item. Doesn't matter about your opinion of marijuana. I personally think that marijuana and all drugs should be made legal, but that's a whole nother program. The fact is that as of right now, the use of medical marijuana is against federal law. Like it or not, if you don't like a law, change it. But it's against federal law. Congress hadn't repealed that law. But the Department of Justice has been instructed by Obama not to enforce it, despite his oath of office, requiring him to defend the Constitution. Here's another item. The Defense of Marriage Act is also the law. But rather than working with Congress to repeal it if there's something wrong, remember, we repeal laws. We don't ignore them. Obama has done the same thing as with medical marijuana. He's instructed the Department of Justice not to defend the Defense of Marriage Act, the law of the land. Here's another little item. In a bipartisan action, Congress refused to pass cap and trade. A bipartisan action, not just the Republicans, not just the Democrats, actually working together, which they rarely do. Congress refused to pass cap and trade. So Obama rammed it through by instructing the EPA to institute it via rulemaking. You know, a bunch of unelected bureaucrats. I think that's how he termed the Supreme Court. He told the EPA to make rules that would, in effect, institute cap and trade. Now, what happened to checks and balances? Congress already said no to that. Here's another little item. Obama doesn't like certain provisions of the No Child Left Behind Act. Neither do I, but it is the law of the land. It was passed by Congress, and Congress has not repealed it. So what did Obama do? He instructed his Department of Education to issue waivers. Again, circumventing Congress and the law, making Congress irrelevant. Here's another little item. Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, refused to pass net neutrality. What happened? At his direction, the Federal Communications Commission approved net neutrality unilaterally via rules. Again, circumventing Congress, ignoring Congress, making Congress irrelevant, ignoring our system of checks and balances. Item. In January, the Senate refused to confirm Obama's appointments to the National Labor Relations Board. So what did Obama do? He deemed the Senate out of session and did the recess appointments, despite not having any authority to deem the Senate out of session. The list of things that Obama has done to circumvent laws, to circumvent Congress, to make Congress irrelevant, to ignore both the constitutional limits placed on the federal government by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and ignoring the will of the people, government of, by, and for the people. That list goes on far too long for this video, or 10 more like it. The bottom line is that Obama is ruling by decree, by presidential order, by rulemaking by his political appointees. He is completely going around Congress, and he is trampling on the Constitution. He's making this country look more like a two-bit dictatorship than the country our founding fathers intended for it to be. Frankly, I think Obama should be impeached. He then should be tried in a criminal court for treason, and if found guilty, punished as prescribed by law for treason. I also think that every single member of the House of Representatives, whose duty it would be to bring impeachment charges, who doesn't do their duty as prescribed by their oath of office and bring those impeachment charges, which means every damn one of them is a coward. Either that or they're enjoying watching the destruction of this country. Those are the only two choices. Now, given Obama's desperation to hold on to the office, and following those tactics can only mean one of two things. Either Obama's stupid, and he's not aware that his politics of dividing America by race, of dividing America by class, of dividing America by gender, of dividing this great melting pot that America is, that by trying to balkanize the United States, he is assuring his defeat. Either he's stupid and he's not aware of that, or he doesn't give a damn, because he's got something up his sleeve that will make his driving off of support immaterial. Something like declaring a national state of emergency, declaring martial law, and canceling the November elections. The obvious question at this point would be, what would be his excuse? And that's easy to answer. Civil unrest, riots, burning of large parts of American cities. You don't think that can happen? What makes you think we're so special that it couldn't happen here when it's happened in Greece, when it's happened in Italy, when it's happened in Thailand, when it's happened in the Middle East? We put our britches on one leg at a time, just like the rest of the world. We're human, just like the rest of the world. Yes, it can happen here. We're special. We are a very special country, but we're not so special that we don't have human emotions. And civil unrest can happen here. Anybody remember the Watts riots in 1968? Anybody remember the 1968 Democratic National Convention? It can happen. You need evidence? Did I hear somebody say they needed evidence? What could cause things like that, and how? What is evidence he would respond in the way I'm talking about, with completely just ignoring, like I said, martial law, national emergency? Well, let's look at a couple things that have happened since he's been in office. Back in December, there was the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011. Now, that's a regular annual thing. It's a Defense Authorization Act authorizing funding for defense. Okay. Happens every year. This year, though, there was a critical item added. Actually, two items. First, the National Defense Authorization Act authorizes the military to detain without charge and to hold indefinitely, without access to legal representation, anyone deemed, not found to be in a court or anything, deemed to be a threat to national security. That decision, who is deemed, could be made by the military. The NDAA allows for the detention without charge or representation, even United States citizens, despite the Fifth Amendment's very specific prohibition against such an action. Let me read it to you. And I'm going to be a little bit emphatic about the important parts, so pay attention. Fifth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation, a subject for another video. Unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, without due process of law. It's pretty damn plain. The NDAA says the military can arrest and detain indefinitely without seeing a lawyer or anything anybody they deem to be a terror threat. Now, there is one small protection in there. NDAA attempts to get around the Fifth Amendment by stating that the detaining without charge is only to be applied on the battlefield. Sounds good. Trouble is, it doesn't define the battlefield. Obama defined the battlefield. With a presidential order in January of 2012, President Obama declared that because terrorist acts have occurred all over the world, including in this country, remember 9/11, that the battlefield would be the entire world. Below this video, there's a link to an article that proves it to you. Here's another little thing you might ought to think about. The U.S. military trains for urban warfare, and they use U.S. cities, they use U.S. cities as their training grounds. And that serves two purposes. Number one, it acclimates military personnel to carrying out military operations on U.S. soil, despite constitutional restrictions. And it acclimates the citizens to seeing the military, to seeing military actions on American streets, turning them into nice, submissive little sheep. Another little thing you might ought to think about, and this one, you're going to have to do a little bit of math, but this one might grab your attention. United States agencies are buying ammunition, and they're buying a lot of ammunition. Now, I said agencies. I didn't say departments. I'm not talking about the Department of Defense. We know they buy lots of ammunition, though one of these agencies is a department, the Department of Homeland Security. You know, those same people who grope and sexually molest your sisters, your mothers, your daughters, your wives, your girlfriends, your female friends. You know, those incompetents, those same high caliber employees that are hired when they answer ads that are printed on the top of pizza delivery boxes. You know, those Neanderthal goons who closely resemble the Gestapo of Nazi Germany. They're being well armed. How well armed are these government agencies? How about I give you some figures from an article on the Daily Caller, a website, and the article's by retired Major General Jerry Curry. The Social Security Administration this year, 2012, purchased 174,000 rounds of hollow point bullets. They said they would be used to combat civil unrest. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You know, the weatherman? They've ordered 46,000 rounds of hollow point ammunition. All this to defend the weather guy? No. It's to be used in emergencies and for civil defense, civil unrest. Here's a good one. Pay attention. In March, the Department of Homeland Security ordered 46,000 rounds of hollow point ammunition. 46,000 rounds. 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 46, ordered 750 million rounds of hollow point ammunition. Matter of fact, all the ammunition I've talked to you about was for hollow point bullets. They are designed to do one thing, and that's to kill. Now, I don't care too much for the United Nations, but hollow point, did you know that hollow point ammunition has been declared inhumane by the United Nations, and its use in combat is banned worldwide? It's against the rules in war. But all that ammunition I've just talked to you about, all of it, 750 million rounds, 46,000 rounds, 174,000 rounds, all of it hollow point ammunition, all of it designed to kill, all of it considered inhumane on the world stage. Now, after the DHS bought that 750 million rounds of hollow point ammunition, turned right around 1 month later and bought another 750 million rounds of various other types of bullets, including armor-piercing shells. Now I want you to think about those numbers, and I want you to think about a couple other things too. Every single one of those agencies I mentioned, the Social Security Administration, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, Department of Homeland Security, all of them, they all operate only in the United States. Only in the United States. All that ammunition bought by agencies that don't operate anywhere but in the United States. Now, consider the amount of ammunition we just discussed. 174,000 rounds, 46,000 rounds, 2 purchases of 750 million rounds. 2 purchases of 750 million rounds just for the Department of Homeland Security. Now, if you want a comparison, the war in Iraq, our military used 70 million rounds a year. 10% of what Homeland Security just bought twice. That's enough ammunition to put not 1, not 3, but 5 bullets into every man, woman, and child in this country. Bought by an agency that doesn't go outside this damn country. To be used in emergencies like civil unrest. Now, isn't quelling civil unrest the job of the local police? And if they can't handle it, the state police? And if they can't handle it, the National Guard? And if it got beyond what they could do, wouldn't the military be able to handle it? Even though that would be unconstitutional, because the Constitution says the military cannot operate inside the borders of the United States. But if the National Guard couldn't handle it, the military could, couldn't they? There's a problem with that. The military, every member of the military, has sworn an oath. That oath is to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And doing what I just suggested would be unconstitutional. So would the military defend the Constitution? Could the administration count on the military to violate their constitutional oath and do what he said? Where do their loyalties lie? To the Constitution. Every agency I just mentioned, all those agencies buying bullets, their loyalties don't lie with the Constitution. They don't swear an oath to defend the Constitution, defend the laws of this country. Their loyalty lies with the administration. They're all political appointees running those agencies. Homeland Security, you know, Big Sis, Janet Napolitano. Those are all political appointees running those places. They are beholden to one person and one person only, and that's the President of the United States. They don't give a damn about the Constitution. Not if they got to keep their job, they got to ignore it. So do you think maybe that's why those agencies need $1.5 billion, with a B, billion rounds of ammunition for emergencies and civil unrest? Now, after thinking about all that, I want you to go back and listen again. You can make this video play over. Get that information firmly in your head. Think about just what might cause that kind of civil unrest that needed to be quelled by agencies loyal to Obama, not by a military loyal to the Constitution. Do you think that maybe a declaration of a national emergency just might do the trick? A national emergency that gave the president an excuse to cancel the November elections? You think? Now that still leaves one question. How does he cause such an emergency? How does he come up with an excuse to declare martial law? Well, I have an idea on that too, and that'll be next week's show, so remember what I always tell you. Y'all come back now. You hear?